Welcome to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is over consciousness, and consciousness, going through consciousness, we'll go over sleep, we'll go over attention, we'll go over meditation, things like that. So let's dive in first into how this chapter and how this textbook defines consciousness. So, consciousness is the amount of awareness of the internal and external environment you have. So, we have waking consciousness, which is being alert and aware of everything that's going on around you. And then, altered states of consciousness is really anywhere in between being unconscious and waking conscious. So, sometimes we are semi-aware of our environment, things going around us. Maybe we're drifting in and out of sleep. So we are in shifting or altered states of consciousness. Sometimes, if you take some kind of medication, which we'll get into later, that can make you not as aware of the things going on around you. Maybe you're not as focused. Maybe you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. That's an altered state of consciousness. And we'll get into all of those things throughout this chapter. Meditation is like an extra state of consciousness, an alerted state of consciousness that may involve focused and regulated breathing, specific body positions, minimization of external distractions, mental imagery, and or mental clarity. So focused attention meditation is where we are focused on one thing, and that is what we are putting all of our attention on. We are, meditating on maybe doing a good job at something. Maybe we're meditating on specifically on being peaceful. Maybe we're meditating simply on being restful. Maybe, there's different things that we meditate on. Open monitoring meditation is where we are aware of everything going on around us, but without being distracted by it. If there's a way you can think of doing that, but you're just open to everything. So you're openly monitoring everything. So when it comes to what we are paying attention to, that can definitely change how aware we are of our internal and external environments. So selective attention is a conscious focus on one stimulus or perception at any given time. So you are in a conversation, and that is, when you're in the middle of a conversation, you don't really seem to be paying attention to the other things going on around you. Except, so let's say you're in a conversation, you're at a party, you're at a cocktail party, you're at a cocktail party, and there's, 200 people there, and you're talking with some friends, but all of a sudden you hear your name. Someone says your name across the room, and all of a sudden you whip your head around and your selective attention is focused elsewhere. So your conscious focus on one stimulus or perception at a given time. Once you hear your name, you are not paying attention to that conversation you're just in anymore. Your attention, you have selective attention. Your focus becomes on the person who said your name. And that's what the cocktail party phenomenon is. Then we have selective inattention, or also known as inattentional blindness. This is an environmental stimuli that are screened out or ignored while attention is selectively focused on something else. And when we get through into our review questions, there's an example of that that I think a lot of people are guilty of, a lot of students are guilty of. And that also goes along with change blindness. Change blindness is a type of selective inattention. So I want to draw your attention to this picture that I have on the right. It's a scan of some lungs. I'm not sure what kind of scan, but looks like a normal pair of lungs. Looks like a normal pair of lungs. Until I tell you to look in this top right corner and see this little cartoon. And I am sure if I had a way to zoom in, I would zoom in and show you this cartoon that's in the top right. But that's what change blindness is that, we see a normal looking picture. If we are not actively looking for something, we're not going to notice something out of the ordinary that blends in. We're not noticing the change. So we become blind to the change. If you're not, if you're just going about your day-to-day lives and something small changes, you're not likely to see it, because you're not actively focused on finding something different. You might watch a competition show or some kind of reality TV, where it's like, how could you not notice what's going on? How did you not see that? But unless you are primed to see something, if you're like, okay, watch out, if I were to have led with this picture, it's like, all right, when you look at this picture, there's something hidden in it. Well, then you're going to use your selective attention to try to find something, a picture hidden within the picture. But since you're not looking for that, you're just looking at a scan of lungs, you're not looking to find this well hidden little cartoon character here. So that's what change blindness is that you are not aware of the change that has happened, the change from the ordinary that has happened. And so you are blind to it. And lastly, we have multitasking. Multitasking, we in our culture, we tend to think that the ability to multitask is a great thing for us to have, that it's a virtue for us to have. But actually, multitasking, which is attention divided among two or more stimuli or activities, such as I can watch TV while doing homework, or I can text and drive, or I can look at my phone while having a conversation with you. We like to think, especially in the world of school and work, that multitasking is a good thing, but it's not. Not only is multitasking, can it be dangerous in times such as texting and driving, but when we divide our attention between two or more things, then performance on both suffers. So let's say I am watching a TV show while doing homework. Not only is the quality of my homework going to suffer, but I also didn't really pay attention to the show. So I don't really know what went on in the show, and I didn't learn as much, or I didn't do as well on my homework. So be careful with multitasking. It's very tempting to multitask because our time is so important to us, and we like to cram in as much as we can, so then we can relax and do whatever we want. But sometimes we can just get things done in a quicker fashion if we don't distract ourselves with doing multiple things at the same time. If we just focus on one thing at a time, I know that's not always possible, but if we can try to focus one thing at a time, our time will be used much more efficiently, and we might have more time to do the things that we want or need to do otherwise. Okay, so a few questions for review. Number one, most psychologists define consciousness as the awareness of our blank and blank environment. It would be our B, internal and external environments. Number two, this altered state of consciousness involves training the mind by using focused and regulated breathing, minimization of distractions, and mental imagery. This is D, meditation. Number three, Saeed is sitting in a bustling restaurant listening to his friend talk about the test he just took. Saeed is interested in the conversation because he is taking the test tomorrow, but all of a sudden his sudden interest is drawn across the room because he heard his name spoken. This is called what? C, cocktail party phenomenon. Number four, Sasha has her laptop open in class and is watching funny cat videos while the professor talks. After class is over, she hears the other students talking about the quiz they are having Friday. Which phenomenon explains why Sasha didn't hear her professor talk about the quiz? Honestly, I could see it being either B or C, because yes, Sasha is multitasking. She's trying to watch the cat video while also listen to the professor talk. But you can also see how this is selective inattention, environmental stimuli that are screened out or ignored while attention is selectively focused on something else. So she was selectively focused on the cat video, so she tuned out the professor talking. So I would accept, or the correct answers would be B or C. I'm not sure what the textbook was thinking was a correct answer, but honestly, I think you could strongly argue that either B or C would be the correct answer. Number 5, multiple studies have shown that when students multitask during class or studying, what happens? A, they do not learn effectively, which leads to lower grades. Okay, next on to sleeping and dreaming. So sleep is the daily natural loss of consciousness controlled by the brain, which is controlled by our circadian rhythm. This is our biological clock that regulates various bodily functions approximately on a 24-hour cycle. And it tells us when we should wake up and when we should sleep. It's kind of our body's routine. This is controlled by the suprachiasmatic nucleus in our brain. This is a small part of the hypothalamus that controls the circadian clock. And our circadian rhythm can get all messed up, especially whenever we travel places in different time zones, jet lag. The reason we feel as crazy as we do is because our circadian rhythm is thrown off. And so there are tips and tricks to getting your circadian rhythm back on track. And what helps is being exposed to natural light during the day and then making sure you have no lights on whatsoever, complete darkness whenever you're trying to sleep, because that is telling your brain, okay, it's daytime and it's nighttime. This is when I should be awake. This is when I should be asleep. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus of the thalamus of the hypothalamus, I'm sorry, tells the pineal gland to produce melatonin, which I'm sure many of you guys have taken melatonin gummies or, some sort of 3 or 5 milligram dose of melatonin to help you fall asleep. And it's not necessarily to make you sleepy. Melatonin is what is part of our circadian rhythm that tells our body, okay, it's time to go to sleep now. So if you're trying to fall asleep, if you're trying to go to sleep, melatonin may be helpful in telling your body it's time to sleep, because our bodies naturally produce melatonin. But if you're trying to stay asleep, if you're having trouble staying asleep, melatonin is not going to help you as something that's supposed to help you fall asleep and tell your body, okay, it's time for me to go to bed now, because melatonin has been secreted, which usually happens whenever the sun starts going down. That's why we get more tired when the time change over, fall and early winter is happening, whenever it starts getting dark out earlier, because the sun is going down earlier. So our pineal gland starts secreting melatonin, which tells our body, okay, it's time for bed. So that's why it's 7 o'clock and you're like, oh my gosh, is it time for bed yet? And you look and you're like, oh my gosh, I thought it was 10 p.m. I'm exhausted. That's why, because our circadian rhythms are trying to catch up with the changes in the amount of daylight that we have. So what are the functions of sleep? We know sleep is important, but why? First, for preservation and protection, they say it's an evolutionary trait for us to sleep when it's dark out, because unsafe things happen in the dark, because we can't see, we can't fend for ourselves as well. So wouldn't it make more sense for us to be asleep in the dark versus when it's light outside? We can get things done when it's light outside. We can protect ourselves better when it's light outside. So let's sleep during the night and be awake during the day. For body restoration, we'll talk a little bit whenever we get into the sleep cycles, the times in our sleep cycles that is important for cellular restoration and cellular turnover and for growth and for healing. And if we don't get adequate, good quality sleep, not just the right amount of time, it doesn't matter if you hit 9 or 10 hours of sleep, if it's not good quality sleep, if you're not staying asleep, if you're not cycling through the several stages of sleep over and over, your body is not going to be able to take care of itself. Next is learning, memory, and synaptic plasticity. And synaptic plasticity is the ability for your neurons to create new pathways and for them to change. So whenever we get good sleep, it reinforces the learning that we've done in the past day or 2 days or week or however long, and also reinforces our ability to create memories. And then growth. If we don't get good sleep, just like with body restoration, especially during those pivotal times of childhood and adolescence, that's why they need to sleep more. That's why children need to sleep more, is because their bodies are going through so much change all the time that if they don't get adequate sleep, their body is going to be stunted. It's not going to reach the potential that it could, because it's not given the opportunity to restore itself and to grow. So now on to the stages of sleep. So first we've got just general wakefulness. That's being awake. That's not being asleep. And that's where we have beta waves. So we're going to go through, I believe, 4 different types of brain waves, and in what phase of sleep, what stage of sleep they occur. So beta waves are low, high frequency, and irregular brain waves. These are present during wakefulness. So they're low. So they're not tall waves, but they happen quickly and they're irregular. They're not super regular. Then we have N1. This is the first stage of sleep where alpha wave activity decreases and larger, slower theta wave activity increases, which is responsible for about 5% of the total time we are asleep at night. So alpha waves, so these start to decrease. These are high frequency, low amplitude waves characteristic of a relaxed or drowsy state. So maybe you're sitting and watching a movie and you're kind of going in and out of consciousness. You're kind of going in and out of being drowsy. You know, you're half awake, but then a minute later you're asleep, and then you kind of jolt back awake. This is kind of you're starting to fall asleep, but you're still slightly conscious. That's an altered state of consciousness. So your alpha waves are high frequency, low amplitude. But then as you start to fall into sleep, they give way for larger but slower theta waves. So it's not going to be as high a frequency, but they're going to be larger waves. They're going to be higher. So brain waves associated with the transition to sleep, and theta waves may be present in the N1 and N2 stages of sleep. So what is the N2 stage of sleep? This is where we'll have the theta waves as well. The second stage of sleep characterized by increased relaxation and a period of light sleep. And this is about 50% of the amount of time you're asleep. You could probably be easily awakened during this time. This might be in the morning, in the early morning, after you've gone through several cycles of deep sleep. Then the last bit, you're going to be in the N2 phase. N3 is the third stage of sleep, consisting of deep sleep characterized by higher amplitude delta waves. Delta waves are higher amplitude, lower frequency brain waves that appear when sleep deepens. So higher amplitude. So these are going to be taller waves and lower frequencies. So they're not going to be happening as much. And this occurs for 20 to 25% of our total time asleep. And then lastly, we get to stage R, which is a deep stage of sleep consisting of rapid eye movement, or REM. So this is your REM sleep, typically associated with dreaming. So this is when you're going to have your most vivid dreams. And again, that's another 20 to 25%. And so dreams are the sequences of images, feelings, ideas, and impressions that occur during sleep. So what's going to happen is we'll start off, obviously we're awake. So we've got wakefulness. Then we've got N1, where we're starting to get, it's the initial stage of sleep. It's a pretty light sleep. And then we get into 2, it's a little bit deeper. We get to N3, it's a little bit deeper. And before we get to REM, we're going to go back to N1, N2, N3, and then into the deepest stage, which is REM. Then we're going to cycle through N1, N2, N3, REM again. Sorry, N2, N3, and REM again. And we're going to keep doing the N2, N3 stage R, or REM sleep, again and again and again for however long you are asleep. And each cycle, I'm not sure, I saw somewhere that each cycle is about 90 minutes. So it's best to sleep in increments of an hour and a half. So 9 hours would be ideal because you can get several full cycles of sleep. And that'd be awesome for your ability to retain information, for your body to heal itself, to restore itself. And you're most likely to wake up after your REM sleep, which would be going back to N2, that's second stage of sleep. That is pretty light period of sleep. And as your stages of REM, your cycles of REM sleep occur, they get longer and deeper each time. So that's why you are most likely to remember the dreams you had earlier in the morning. So, or more in the morning versus your first stage of REM. So you might wake up right after one stage of REM because you've gone back to N2, and you'll remember that dream because you just had it and it was the deepest, most vivid stage of REM you've had. Okay, so all of these, going through those cycles of sleep, that is what is a normal night of sleep. So what happens when you don't have a normal night of sleep? And that occurs over and over and over again. So we've got insomnia. This is a sleep disorder characterized by dissatisfaction with the duration or quality of sleep. So this is the ability to fall asleep, the ability to stay asleep, the quality of sleep. Some people don't know that they are tossing and turning all night, or that they aren't really sleeping well. They say, well, I got 8 hours of sleep last night, I should be fine. But their body didn't actually get into those deep stages of sleep, the N3 and the R stage of sleep. And so they're not fully rested. So insomnia covers all of those. Then we've got narcolepsy, which is where your body is confused. And it's a sleep disorder characterized by excessive daytime sleepiness and periodic uncontrollable sleep attacks. You could fall asleep while you're driving. You could fall asleep in class. You could fall asleep, anywhere at any time, because something in your brain is confused with knowing when is the proper time to sleep and when is not. Then we have sleep apnea, which is a sleep disorder involving regular interruptions of breathing during sleep. Some people stop breathing in their sleep, and that's what sleep apnea is. So some people that snore really loudly, that could be a sign or a precursor of sleep apnea, that they're struggling to breathe in their sleep. And some people, it happens, maybe one or a couple times a night. And some people, it happens multiple times per night. And so they have to wear what's called a CPAP machine, which is a mask over their face that forces oxygen into their lungs so that they can keep breathing and they don't have to worry about potentially passing away in their sleep. And higher people with morbid obesity, the more overweight you are, the more likely you are to develop sleep apnea, which is one reason to stay on top of your physical well-being, because you don't want to have to worry about, one, wearing a machine while you're asleep, and two, stopping breathing while you're asleep. That's really scary. Then we have parasomnias, and this is abnormal behavior, experiential or physiological events that occur in conjunction with sleep. So things that can happen in your sleep that are not normal. So first, we've got nightmares. These are scary dreams, which almost always occur during REM sleep, because this is when our vibrant dreams occur. I'm sure all of you guys have experienced a nightmare or two, maybe even recurrent nightmares. They're scary, and they can really mess with you, and they can affect your quality of sleep. Next, we've got sleepwalking. This is a parasomnia that occurs during non-REM sleep in response to an abnormal transition from deep sleep to REM or a lighter stage. So it's the transition from N3 to REM or REM to N2. Because during REM, our bodies cannot move. Our eyes are moving, but sleep paralysis would, if you suffer or struggle with sleep paralysis, this is when it would happen, is during REM sleep, because while our brains are firing the most and our eyes are twitching back and forth and our brains are being most active with these dreams, our bodies cannot move. Our muscles are paralyzed. They cannot move. And so sleepwalking cannot occur during a normal REM cycle. So our sleepwalking can only occur when there's abnormal transitions to REM or to N2. Next is sleep terrors. Sleep terrors is a parasomnia characterized by scary dreams and increased autonomic nervous system activity. Typically occurs during non-REM sleep and therefore can be accompanied by movement. That's scary. That's when someone can hurt themselves. Scientists say that we dream during REM sleep, and even though our brains are, firing and our eyes are, the rapid eye movement is occurring, but our bodies are unable to move for our own safety. That if we were able to act out the things that are happening to us or that we are doing in our dreams, we could hurt ourselves. And so it's actually for our protection that doesn't happen. But sleep terrors, because they're happening in non-REM sleep, we can be a harm to ourselves or to others when these occur. Okay, so another review. Number 1, our blank is a biological clock responsible for the regulation of body temperature and levels of arousal during our sleep and wake cycle. That's D, circadian rhythm. Number 2, in which stage of sleep do vivid dreams typically occur? C, REM sleep. Number 3, the brain waves with the highest amplitude are referred to as what? Let's see here. That would be delta waves. B, delta waves. It wouldn't be beta. It wouldn't be low. So those are short. Those are not high amplitude waves. It wouldn't be alpha. Those are low amplitude. It wouldn't be theta. Those are starting to get bigger, but it's delta. They have a higher amplitude. Beta waves are associated with blank, while theta waves are characteristic of the blank stage. Beta waves are associated with alert wakefulness, while theta waves are characteristic of the N2 stage. So that would be D. Okay, now on to psychoactive drugs. What is a psychoactive drug? It's a chemical substance that alters brain function, resulting in changes in consciousness, perception, and or mood. Which can then lead to psychological dependence. This is the emotional or motivational symptoms associated with repeated drug use, such as intense cravings, inability to concentrate on other non-drug related activities, and or feeling restless when not taking the drug. And so this is what, besides the physical effects, this is what we need to be wary of when taking even prescription drugs, because if we don't cut it off at the appropriate time, it can cause these feelings, and certain drugs can cause it sooner than others. And then we have tolerance. This is a form of physiological dependence where the body becomes used to a drug, resulting in an increased need for the drug to achieve the same effects. And some drugs also, this happens quicker. Some drugs that you will never get to the same high that you first got. Some, it just takes more and more and more. Like when I talked about caffeine a few chapters ago, caffeine requires more and more and more to take. So you build up a tolerance. So what used to be 1 cup of coffee kept you awake. Now it requires 3 or 4. Physiological dependence is a process in which the body becomes physically dependent or reliant on the drug. This typically involves tolerance and or withdrawal. So withdrawal symptoms happens whenever we stop taking whatever drug. These are physiological symptoms produced by the body when a drug is absent from the system. And this could be anything from sweating to throwing up, to seizures, to even death. Withdrawal symptoms can be very, very severe. So that's why it's important if you have a tolerance on any kind, pretty much any kind of drug, like a for real tolerance, then you need to undergo withdrawal under the supervision of a medical professional. A substance abuse disorder is a psychological disorder characterized by a pattern of drug use leading to distress or significant impairment in functioning. So this includes impaired control over use. So you're always wanting to use. Social impairment, you can't function in work or in your friendships. You start to skip work. You start to disappoint not hang out with your friends, things like that. So you're socially impaired. Using in risky situations, you stop becoming concerned with the times in which you take it. Maybe you take some kind of heavy drug right before you drive, or when you're going to be in care of children, something like that. And then psychological dependence, like we just talked about. So one class of drug, we're going to go through the classes of drugs. The first one is depressants. So we've got depressants and we've got stimulants. Depressants are classes of drugs that depress or slow down the central nervous system and other bodily functions. So our heart rate's going to decrease, our brain activity is going to decrease, and it's going to make us relaxed. It's going to make us sleepy. So we've got alcohol. It slows down our reaction time. So that's why drinking and driving is so dangerous, because our reaction time for stopping or for turning or for anything, for swerving, is so much slower that it's not safe to drive when you've been drinking. Barbiturates, which initially started off as a sleeping medication type for sleeping medications, but they're known to be very dangerous and to be highly addictive. So now more often it's benzodiazepines that people are on for sleeping and mood regulation disorders. But all of those are depressants. And then stimulants are drugs that excite or increase the functioning of the central nervous system, such as caffeine, nicotine, amphetamines, which drugs for ADHD are amphetamines. And what they do is they actually stimulate the brain more, which takes away your brain's need to find things to stimulate it so you can focus on one thing. So that's what amphetamines are. Then methamphetamine, which is meth, is so dangerous. It's one of the most dangerous drugs because its chemical makeup is so close to identical to our natural neurotransmitter dopamine that our brain can't even tell the difference, and it destroys our dopamine receptors, so that we can never feel the euphoria. Even so, you're always searching for the best high, but the best high you'll ever have is the first time you take it. But you're always going to be searching for that good high, but you're never going to get it as you did with the first one, because it destroys your dopamine receptors. And so you're going to keep using and keep using and keep using, and it causes brain death. It will literally shut off parts of your brain. So methamphetamine is so dangerous. And then cocaine. The next classes are narcotics and hallucinogens. So narcotics, also known as opioids, this is a category of drugs used medically in the management of pain. So these are most likely types of drugs that you are going to be prescribed. Say you have a surgery, or you have an injury of some sort. So some type of codeine, maybe a morphine drip, hydrocodone, oxycodone. You may be given any one of these. But the thing about narcotics is that they are highly, highly addictive. And so you have to be very wary of only taking the prescribed amount, or maybe I had knee surgery, ACL reconstruction surgery when I was in middle school, and it made me nervous about taking them. I took the least amount that I felt like my body needed to because of how highly addictive they are, and how easily you can build that tolerance to them, and can make you need more and more. And then heroin is also considered a narcotic, which is also very, very dangerous. Next is hallucinogens. This is a class of drug that can produce unusual sensations, distortions in the perception of reality, and intense emotional mood swings. So this could happen in a naturally grown substance such as magic mushrooms, or synthetic lab grown, which is LSD, and then also marijuana. Okay, some more review questions. Number one, physiological dependence on a substance typically includes blank and blank. Tolerance and withdrawal, D. Number two, which neurotransmitter receptors does methamphetamine destroy in the brain? D, dopamine. Number three, benzodiazepines come from the class of drugs called blank, which blank the functioning of the central nervous system. They are depressants, which decrease the functioning of the central nervous system. So that would be A. It doesn't say A, but that's what it should be. Okay, and that is the end of chapter 4, and I'll see you next with chapter 5.